Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. This was said by Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher from the late 19th century. Hello, and welcome back to the Wisdom Warhammer channel. And in today's video, it will be a masculinity of video, but it will also be a philosophy video. There will be two characters I will talk about, and they are the Primarchs Corvus and Konrad. And I will talk about the similarities of these two beings of darkness. And then I will go over how these characters fall into the philosophy of nihilism. Now, disclaimer, some of the philosophical topics that I will talk about in this video are pretty dark, so if you want to skip the video, that is fine. Now, like in my other videos, I do not own the artwork in the video, and all things Warhammer are owned by Games Workshop and Black Library. Now, with the intro out of the way, let's get the video started, shall we? Now, the two Primarchs, Corvus and Konrad are the duality of nihilism, and you may be wondering, what is the duality of nihilism? And let me explain. The duality of nihilism is a pretty complex philosophical concept, and the two main points are the affirmation of existence and skepticism of nihilism. Now, nihilism on the surface is very dark and it tends to rub people the wrong way in society and pop culture, and those who are labeled as nihilists are often seen with distaste and criticism, mainly being negativity and depression. Yes, that is a very good explanation of it, but I will explain that nihilism can make someone more caring to people and the world around them. Now, the big current social media influencers and male role models seem to be in the black pill category, and nihilism is usually categorized with the black pill. And from these words, the men tend to cause massive amount of damage to young men and boys that follow them. But those who have truly read the works of Nietzsche come to realize that it's not really as dark as people think, because nihilism gives choice, and that is where the duality of nihilism comes in. That duality was defined by Nietzsche as passive and active nihilism, and both sides of this nihilistic concept rips apart someone's convictions of religion, moral, and metaphysical, and see that life is meaningless, and from this they can walk two paths. The first is passive nihilism. Passive nihilism is just giving up and not really trying to change, and they tend to join religious, political, and ideological groups to give them purpose, or just kind of isolate themselves and just rot until the end. Nietzsche did say that those who walk this path are weak-willed and lack strength to create their own meaning and tend to act like a butthead. Now, there are those who go down this path that can become a false Übermensch, which means overman or superman in similar terms, and Konrad was the definition of the false Übermensch. Now, active nihilism, on the other hand, is of course when one rips apart their old beliefs and values similar to the first path, but instead of them falling into religious, political, and or ideological groups, or just rot, they create their own meaning through introspection. Now, Corvus is the definition of active nihilism, and he would eventually become the true Übermensch after he looked at himself after a year of contemplation and introspection in his chambers, and after a year he came out changed. I am now going into details about the two sides and how us people can learn from it, and especially us men, because a lot of us have been drawn in that abyss, and a decent number of us, including me, have started and have stopped drowning and started swimming in the abyss. Konrad Kurz will be the first we will go over, and he will be labeled as the false Übermensch. And there are 3 examples of why he is labeled as this, and the thing that was the main point of his choices and course of life is, of course, his fatalistic mindset. Throughout Konrad's life, he was haunted by visions of his life, and a lot of the visions came true, but there were some that didn't come to be. The 2 big ones were when Konrad had a vision of a criminal he was dealing with that showed him that if he spared the criminal, it would turn Nostromo into a better world. The other vision was when he saved Lorgar from the lightning claws of Raven Lord Corvus Corax, even though when Konrad looked at Lorgar, he saw his death upon the world of Istvan. Now you may think Konrad must have questioned these visions and thought about changing, and the answer is he did question the accuracy of his vision sometimes, but ultimately chose the path of darkness and saw it as fate. His visions were fueled by his pessimism and despair, of course, and a lot of these visions would happen just as he saw, and it would eventually lead him being drowned by the abyss. Now, this first example is when Konrad was far into his depravity of dark torture, skinning, and murder, and he would try to rationalize his actions, but failed, of course. And he was called out multiple times, one time by his first captain Iago Sevitarian and by his brothers Dorn and Corax. But Iago calling out Konrad was interesting, and this is the first example. Iago literally roasted Konrad on his choices in his life and the visions his Primarch saw, and the philosophy of the Primarch, and here is what he said. Konrad said something about him becoming the monster and the sinner, so none of his people had to become one. And he said, look at the results. He said his legion ranks were filled by criminals and the most depraved candidates from Nostromo, and said his sons enjoyed this way of life, and not because they had to. Now, Iago did say, what did Konrad do to change the worlds the 8th Legion conquered for the better beyond the actions of skinning and torturing people and broadcasting their screams across the Vox networks? Iago pretty much said Konrad did nothing to change himself, and from this, he didn't teach people things that would improve their life and the world around them, and from this, Nostromo never changed. It just got worse. From these comments / roasts, Konrad literally grabbed his son and first captain by the throat and said he overstepped his bounds, and Iago said, how can you lie to me like this, and how can you lie to yourself? Iago said, continued saying, I stand in your mind witnessing the memories of his Primarch, and he said, you love this dark path just as sons do. And he said, it wasn't the only way, just the easiest way. Sev finished the roast by saying, Konrad enjoyed this way, just like his sons, and he said that it makes Konrad and his sons feel righteous and superior to other people. Now, from this example, Konrad was confronted, saying that he had a choice to change himself and his legion for the better, but instead he did not change and claimed his choices were the better way and it was fated to be this way, but in actuality it was not. The thing us men can learn from this exchange is saying that one must question themselves and the values and morals they were taught when they were younger, and we must truly ask ourselves, does this feel like the right choice? I have noticed that the social media and manosphere influencers say their way is the true way, and instead of questioning why us men should follow that way, a lot of us blindly follow it. Then those who follow that path may seem powerful and confirm that they are right on the right path, but there is something deep down that says there's something wrong with this path. Or there's some times where there's not something down there saying this is wrong. Then when these men try to fix the damage that their way of life has caused them, it ends up being too late. And from this, they are haunted by their past choices and become shadows of themselves and have been consumed by the void of the abyss. Now, this next example of Konrad we will be going over is his vision of the child criminal on Nostromo. During Konrad's time upon Nostromo, he would hunt everyone who committed crime, and in this specific encounter, it was of a kid who violated a woman alongside another kid, but the other kid was killed. Konrad broke some of the kid's bones, and as he was about to continue, he witnessed the vision of the child stabbing and escaping the Night Hunter, and from this, the kid would be cursed, as the Primarch would hunt this prey down again. The second part of the vision showed that Konrad spared the child and would start something that would bring Nostromo into a dark, bright, golden age and change it for the better. Instead of Konrad getting his bearings after seeing the vision and looking at his choices, he assumed the first part of the vision was the correct one and killed the broken boy, even though the blade was far from the child. Now this goes to show that he thought the first part of the vision was going to happen no matter what, which would fuel Konrad's fatalistic mindset in the beginning, even though he had a choice. From this example, we can learn that everything is not set in stone, and the only thing that is set in stone is that we die, and in between we die, we choose how to live. Even though we see how something could happen, and sometimes it might happen, but for the majority of the time it doesn't happen. It's all in our mind. But the black pill influencers, looks maxing, and incel communities say that everything in our lives is out of our control, and yes, there's a lot of stuff that is out of our control, like our genetics and everything outside of our bodies, but we can work with the cards we are given. Us men just have to find how to use the cards that will improve our lives and allow us to swim comfortably in the abyss instead of drown. Now, the last example and thing we can learn from this last one is a basic one, and this example is from the last conversation between Konrad and the Emperor on the last day Konrad would live. In this last talk between the father and son, it was really sad, and the Emperor would forgive his son for the things he did and said Konrad's insanity was not his fault, nor was the Emperor. Konrad would say that light is anathema to him, but the Emperor responded by saying there is light within all of his sons. Konrad was shocked by all this, and then the Emperor said one final thing to his son before the final talk concluded, and that was Konrad chose to believe in fate. He continued by saying you chose to do horrific things that he did during his life, and without choice the universe would be nothing and would not function, and the chaos gods rely upon choice. The Emperor's final words to Konrad was, a single fate is one book in a library of unlimited futures, and Konrad chose to be fate's prisoner, and if Konrad believed in himself, he would be able to see this, but he chose to be trapped, manipulated, and insane. Konrad just looked at him with his twisted expression and then ripped apart the flesh effigy that he created to summon his father. From this conversation between the two, we can learn that we do have a choice in life, and we have to choose what path we want to go down, and that is the cost of existence. That is one of the things that those who see life as meaningless, and from that they choose to be the way they are and seeing it as fate, and we should not see it like this. We must choose how to live and always listen to ourselves and not always follow what other people are doing. And it doesn't give us an excuse to rot and give up. Now, to summarize the false Übermensch, Konrad Curtis and his philosophy may make him seem like an edgelord, but on closer examination, he was weak-willed and lacked mental strength to change for the better. He did question himself a lot, but then used the excuse of he was fated to walk down this insane dark path of passive nihilism and allowed the abyss to consume him, and he drowned in it. Now, I have seen a lot of new age black pill male influencers who label themselves as self-improvement and may seem like it is, but deep down in their souls they're drowning in the abyss and end up dragging other men down into the abyss. I would suggest that men watch out for the kinds of men and closely observe how they act in life and how they treat people around them. I think Konrad Kurz could have learned from Corvus and how to deal with certain things which would prevent Konrad from being completely insane and change it for the better. Speaking of Corvus Corax, I will be labeling him as the true Ubermensch, and there are 3 examples of why he was like this during his time in the 30K universe. First, I will say that Corax is one of the more sensitive and melancholic Primarchs, and you can see it in the stories that he is in, but he can be very vengeful and bitter. Now, the first example I will use for Corvus Corax was when he and his legion were dealing with the Carinine Empire, and the war started off well until the Battle of Zenith 312, which had the most cruel ruler of the Carinine Empire. The ruler used a bioweapon that turned his populace into hordes of mindless beasts that caused chaos against the Imperial forces and Raven Guard Shadow squads. When Corax saw this, he felt anger and saw that the ruler escaped the battle, and from this, Corax ordered his legion force to track down the ruler, and they found him. But the detail I want to talk about is when Corax mentioned the new order for his legion, his commanders named Agapito and Brand-Nev said not to pull away from the war in search of this ruler. Corax was blind by vengeance, that he was not seeing the tactical reasoning, but he wanted to make sure that all tyrants and cruel rulers feared him and the coming of the Imperium. But even though this wasn't tactically sound, eventually the order was followed, but it caused a lot of Imperial naval vessels and Imperial forces, and eventually the Carinine Empire was conquered. Corax and his legion was able to track the ruler of Zenith 312 to a star fort at a nearby sun, and he led a force of Moritat to destabilize the defenses and allow the fort to fall into the sun. The mission was a success, and the ruler begged for mercy, but Corax did not care and broadcasted the final moments of the tyrant to the nearby ships. From this example, we can see the abyss that was in the Ravenlord come out, and Corax seemed to drown a bit but was able to find his way back after he started to use a Konrad tactic. But I do think that it is nice to feel angry and more passionate about something, but we must not let the abyss drown us, but we must think and look at the situation at hand. From this, it would allow us to look at the pros and cons of the choices in front of us, because not all choices seem like the right choice, and a lot of manosphere and black pill influencers seem to not make a lot of good choices, and from this, their followers tend to not make good choices as well. A decent amount of them tend to say things and do things that don't exactly help them, and ends up isolating them and causing people to hate them. This next example of Corax was his time after the drop site massacre, when he and the remains of his legion escaped the fields of Isfan 5. Obviously, Corax was extremely depressed from this massive betrayal, and watching thousands of his sons get gunned down by their former allies, but Corax first had to get his legion ships out of the system and back to Terra. Now, during his trip back, Corax tried to keep hope, but deep down he was in despair and was on the brink of pure-blooded vengeance, and not his kind of vengeance. Corax was also severely injured from the Battle of Isfan 5 and was not healed until he got back to Terra, and it would be by the Emperor. Now, Corax was getting better and feeling more hopeful after he left Terra, because he had a batch of advanced gene stock from the Primarch project and the Emperor's gene vaults. Korax would also witness another horror, and that was when a new batch of Raven Guard raptors that had the advanced gene seed would be corrupted and turned into mutant chaos beasts. The Alpha Legion were the ones who did this, and the infiltrators would be slain, but it was too late. The Legion was back to square one, but Korax would use the raptors throughout the Horus Heresy, and they would be effective. Sadly, near the end of the war, they would deteriorate and would be put into cells in the deepest parts of the Raven Spire. Near the end of the Horus Heresy, Korax would have to put down the raptors because they were in pain, and also they were warp-corrupted beasts, and he vowed to his father that he would kill all warp-tainted beasts in the galaxy. Now, this example can teach us to remember to stay grounded as much as we can, but if we fall at least once, that is fine, but we must get back up and keep going, and not be dragged into the abyss deeper. The Black Pill influencers and Manosphere guys think they're logical and grounded, but they are not, and even I can see it, and they tend to do stupid things and life-altering choices, and they tend to not realize their actions and still keep going. Now, other men seem like they are so great and are better than most men, but in reality they are Icarus and they are flying so close to the sun. If you know the story of Icarus, you will know that these men will have a very hard and brutal crash into the depths of the abyss. I suggest not putting these shining glories on a pedestal because it may seem like a nice warm light, but in reality it has a darker shadow that will consume you. This last example that I will use is very similar to the last example of Konrad Kurz, but he had a very different ending than his other brother. After Corvus Corax killed his mutated sons, he would lock himself in his chambers for a year, and there must have been a lot of introspection and delving into the abyss of his mind and soul. I do think Corax probably talked to his father one last time, similar to Konrad, but I don't know what they talked about if the talk happened anyways. But I think Corax went into the darkest parts of himself and analyzed them, and he also looked at the values and morals he held close to him. I think he restructured the deepest parts of himself so he could be more whole of the abyss, and he would eventually truly find himself. And he would crumble his high dark castle that was fractured and built a strong powerful house in the abyss of his mind. Now, after a year of isolation in his chambers, he would leave and he would be more melancholic and grounded, and he said nevermore to his sons and left for the Eye of Terror and searched for his traitor's warp-tainted brothers. From this final example, we can learn from Corvus Corax is isolation can be very helpful, but it can be very damning, and here is why. Isolating allows one to truly look at themselves and skin the layers of themselves that don't think it adds something to their lives. Think of isolation as an opportunity to clear house in one's mind and keep things that one person actually wants in his house in the mind and throw out their old selves outside. Isolation also causes one to be vulnerable, and that can cause massive damage to oneself and can allow some beings of the abyss to come forward and enlighten them. That's where the Black Pill and Manosphere guys come, and they end up damaging themselves even more and end up drowning in the abyss, but think they are swimming. Those who come out of isolation could be like Konrad Kurz, who is fatalistic and has drowned in the abyss and end up causing damage to themselves and the world around them. Then there are those who come out of isolation who can be like Corvus Corax, who has skinned themselves, and instead of drowning, they are able to swim in the abyss and help those around and help heal the parts of the world around them. Now, to summarize the video on the duality of nihilism and talking about the false Ubermensch Konrad Kurz and the true Ubermensch Corvus Corax, these beings are the best examples of Passive and active nihilism. Like I said before, passive nihilism is when one recognizes that life is meaningless and wears a mask of resignation, withdrawal, but lacks strength or will to create their own values. These men may seek community in religious organizations, political parties, and or social structures that can give them a purpose, or just rot and just go down a path of darkness. Like Konrad is the purest example of this, but in the end he joined the traitors even though he had a choice but lacked the will and strength to change and truly question himself. Active nihilism is when one recognizes that life is meaningless, but instead of joining groups to give them values similar to the passive nihilists, the active nihilists do something else. Active nihilists deconstruct old beliefs and values that they were taught when they were younger, and from this they are able to use this freedom to choose their own values and purpose. When Corvus walked his path, he chose personal agency, creativity, and the power to transform himself into something that he chooses to be, and he chose to stay loyal and eventually accept his warp-based powers. Personally, I am the active nihilism path, but I consider myself an absurdist, which is very similar to active nihilism, but definitely different. But I will say I'm at peace in this kind of philosophy. Now, people will say I'm negative and depressed and need help, but to be honest, I'm free and happy. And yes, there are days where I am depressed and negative, but I get up and do things that make me happy. I like to draw, read, and make videos, and even though it may seem boring and beta to some, but I can say it is amazing, and those who say they are not happy, and to be honest, I have been there before. Thankfully, I am not in that mind state, and I'm grateful for my choices in life. And with that being said, I thank you guys for watching the video and for supporting the channel. And with that being said, if this is the first video you guys are watching and want to see more, hit the subscribe button and bell to be notified for when a new video comes out. Now, I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next video. This is Wisdom Warhammer, signing off.